True horsemen don't want a horse to buck.
Is it bad if they do buck? No. Do we care? No.
True horsemen don't get a horse to buck under saddle.
Does that make sense? It really makes no difference whatsoever.
Hey guys, you might you might recognize me from the Clinton Anderson Night Latch video. This is not the video I was hoping to make tonight, but it's kind of my only option given the circumstance I'm in. This morning was weird. Started normal. I got up, drove to my first stop. I got up, made coffee, drove to my first stop. Started shoeing a horse, and I got this text message. It said, "How are you feeling today? Are you getting any Clinton fandom hate? Haha, that's wild." Which was weird. Didn't know what that was about. I honestly thought my friend's phone got hacked for a second. But then I got another one, and another one, and a couple more. And got to the point where I was getting distracted shoeing this horse, and I was like, I need to check what's going on. So I set down my rasp, went and pulled up TikTok. And let me just start this by saying I have been following Clinton Anderson for years. I own some of his tack. I use some of his tack daily. I, watched his whole, groundwork series when I was younger. I still watch his Rain Cow Horse videos to this day. Like literally, I think last night I had one on watching some of the work he's doing on his young stock. And I probably still will keep watching him. Honestly, some of his cow horse stuff is just phenomenal. So I was a little bit taken aback when I pulled up an 11-minute and 48-second video of a trainer I've looked up to for years, just trying to tear me down in one of the most disrespectful ways I've ever been talked to in my life.
That's dumb shit. This is the shit you want to teach people? Come on, fucking think about this for a second. Dead people don't write checks. I made millions of dollars. Stop there. That's the biggest fucking stupidity I've ever fucking heard.
But hey, I understand. I am opening myself up to criticism just by posting horse-related content on the internet. The horse industry is a rough place to be, and to be here and to be a part of it and just to function day to day, it takes thick skin. But given I put myself in this position and I show up every day, thick skin is the name of the game, and we just got to push through it. So if you're new here, or if you're one of the folks who has been trying to find me from the Down Under Horsemanship comment section, I see you guys. I'm right here. I'm available. You can message me. You can talk to me. I'm here to answer any questions you have. Welcome. I do these bar talks. They're kind of fun. I like them. But if you're new here, let me introduce myself. My name is Isaac Kent. I am a lifelong student of the horse. I'm an accredited farrier. I'm a colt starter for advanced horsemanship. I'm a clinician. I'm a colt starting competitor. And even though Clinton Anderson would really, really like to prove otherwise, I am a horseman in every sense of the word, and I say that with my chest out. I'm not famous. I'm not rich. I'm not as successful as him. But none of those things determine the relationship I have with my horses and the horses I've been entrusted to care for. I don't think any of those things make a horseman. And I will say that the way I live my life day to day, the way I show up to work, show up for my horses, the horses I trim and shoe and take care of in that way, and the horses people entrust me to train and work on and start under saddle, I would call myself a horseman, and I would gladly debate anyone who wants to disagree with me on that. Out of all of the training footage I have and the teaching I have available on YouTube, Down Under Horsemanship decided to watch my very first attempt at filming any sort of content, any sort of video content for a social media platform. at the end of the day, the horse world has moved online. And unfortunately, to keep getting hired for clinics and spreading my program, I do need a social media platform, which is why I started the Bar Talk, started making a lot of the content I'm making. It's not because I want to be putting myself out here in this way, but it is becoming a very necessary part of the industry. And I'm slowly working on developing my media skills. I know I'm not the best at it. I'm not the most fluent in teaching in a video setting. I know I don't always, get my point across in the most effective way, which is why I much, much prefer the in-person setting with lessons and clinics and being, one-on-one, or, in the case of 2 weeks ago, 50 on one, where I was actually talking to a room of people about my theories and my ideas. I much prefer the dialogue, the back and forth, the ask me questions, let's clarify. In a video sense, I can only say so much. And if there are questions, if there are holes, if there are things left unanswered, I can't in that video respond to that in the moment, which I think is what got in the way and caused kind of this issue here. So at the time of filming this particular video, there was a trend going around TikTok of people just getting thrown off of colts, and it was a pretty decent trend. I forget the song that was going on with it, but there were pretty consistently I was seeing, and this is the time where I was trying to study the algorithm and really get into stuff. Being brand new to the platform of YouTube and trying to get the TikTok going and those kind of things, I thought it would be cool if I jumped in as a cult starter to give my 2 cents. And as a cult starter, I believe being able to ride out a buck is kind of a necessary skill set you have to have, and that is a skill set I do have. So in response to a lot of those videos of people getting bucked off of horses, I thought it would be, kind of entertaining, kind of algorithmically friendly to jump on there and post a video of, hey, here's how I sit a buck if a buck ever comes up, if they were to come up in the early education of that horse. And that was just a response to a lot of the videos I was seeing at the time, which I didn't love. It was a lot of yanking on the face and a bit. It was a lot of, getting dumped in the round pen, horses flipping over backwards. Really, really stuff I didn't agree with, and kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to be like, hey, there are qualified people out here that do this. Just to be clear, this was never meant to be a cult starting video. It wasn't meant to be training theory, horse development. I never even hinted at in the video the fact that you shouldn't focus on groundwork. You shouldn't set your horse up properly and do your proper preparation to, get your horse to a safe riding point. There are 9 hours of publicly available footage of me on YouTube working on those things and working on the groundwork, fundamentals, as well as, the public clinics I do and the demos I do. And you can watch me compete. I'll be competing, the next 2 months in colt starting competitions, and you will see the groundwork and the foundation work I lay. This video was simply the mechanics and skills I've developed through years of riding problem horses. They bring me an aged horse that bucks. They bring me a horse that rears. They bring me biters and kickers and bolters and all these things. And this was simply a video of me laying out my strategy if a bucking scenario ever came to fruition in the round pen. It was not supposed to be, a training video. This wasn't my entire colt starting program is just letting them buck. That wasn't really the point of that short clip I put up. So I'm not green to the industry, and I'm not green to colt starting, and I know that pride plays a huge point in all of this, but I'm not too proud to say that my colts have never bucked. They don't buck often. I start probably 50 a year for the public. Say maybe 1 or 2 of those break in half for me. That being said, I would much rather be prepared and set myself up for success in an event that does happen. Now it's not common. 1 or 2 out of 50 is, 4 to 8%. Is my math right? 2 to 4% of the horses that will do that on me. So it's not a common thing that happens at all. It's actually very uncommon for a horse to buck on me, but I do have the skill set and I'm able to deal with those things as they come up. I think it's kind of irresponsible to dismiss the idea of learning how to sit a buck, the idea of being prepared, having the tools in place necessary if something like that, as rare as it is, 2 to 4% of the time, it still might come up. So I would rather be I'd rather be competent at my job and ready for the struggles of my job than just be wishful and hopeful that my groundwork paid off, and thinking about where the holes were when I'm laying in the dirt with a broken leg. I don't want that, so I prepare myself to not have to deal with that.
The more times you pick yourself up off the ground, the better your groundwork gets.
And as a young trainer in the industry, I deal with harsh criticism pretty often. But what I don't deal with as much is being portrayed as uneducated, as being portrayed as the cowboy type, as the roughy type. That's not, if you've worked with me, if you've been one of my clients, if you've come to one of my clinics, if we've had a lesson together, you would know that I'm a very science first, tradition second minded trainer. That's how I function. That's how I work. I'm actually currently on a 4-hour lecture, little tour deal I'm doing on endocrinology in the context of colt starting. I'm very academic about the way I go about horse training and colt starting specifically, and it's something I care a lot about, and I've spent a lot of time in my program building working on that. And I really put the scientific knowledge and the scientific advancements we have in very recent years all the way all the way up to 2025, where we're learning more things about how the horse brain works and implementing that into my training. And you're absolutely right, Clinton, if you're watching this, which you are. Sorry. I assume you're watching this, so hey, welcome. So I absolutely agree with you. Some things need to be 100 years in the past.
It went out 100 years ago.
And the industry is moving forward slowly, but we're making progress. There are only a few people really working on equine science, and I wish there was more. I wish we could advance things a little quicker, but we are where we are, and I really put in the modern scientific research into my training, and I try to implement it as much as possible. That being said, I disagree on a fundamental level. With the idea of being too good for a night latch.
If you need a fucking night latch on your saddle, you shouldn't be riding a goddamn fucking horse.
Being too proud to admit there are holes in my program.
Guess whose horses didn't ever break in half? Mine.
And being too arrogant to understand the context in which a video was posted.
That's what this dumb shit is.
Just as an example, the Australian education system graduates about 90.5% of their student body. It's, pretty good ratio. So 90.5% of all students that go through the Australian education system pass, get their diploma, but that method of education did not work for Clinton Anderson.
I have no formal education, okay? I left high school when I was 15. I did not graduate high school, did not go to college, did not go to business school.
I find it a bit ironic that he has his method that works for a large majority of horses, but he can't comprehend it not working for a couple. When in reality, when we boil it down, that's exactly what he himself went through. The education system that was set up, the method that was set up to educate him, didn't work for his specific type of brain, his specific type of learning, and he found education elsewhere. It shouldn't be that hard to comprehend that even though the method and the groundwork program, as great as it might be and as foolproof as it might be, it's not unreasonable to assume, it might not be reasonable to ponder the existence of a horse or two or a couple or a certain percentage that might slip through the cracks, that might not get the understanding that the large majority of young horses do. It shouldn't be that hard of a concept to understand. So that boils down to, as a colt starter, you need to be sticky. You do, whether you use those skills or not. And I'm gonna make a bold assumption here and say that most people who start colts have had an experience where they needed to be sticky. That's just reality. That's just how it goes. You would be hard pressed to find someone with a decent amount of years of experience starting colts that can loudly say, "Oh, I've never had a horse be squirrely on me. I've never had to sit something that was a little tough to sit." I can't think of a single one, and I'm good friends with a lot of talented colt starters. But it's, and I can use Clinton Anderson's own words here: the worst thing you can do for a colt is come off of them, get bucked off of them. And if we're using that logic, being sticky, learning how to sit a buck is a necessary part of the game. Okay, so as a businessman myself, I absolutely respect the hustle that Clinton Anderson does on his program for marketing his videos and getting them out and really making his method seem like the way to train horses. It's actually, honestly, very, very impressive. That being said, his marketing is littered with an insane amount of logical fallacies in just about any video you watch. So if we're only focusing on the video that was made about me, the first and most obvious logical fallacy he made was the straw man argument. So he painted myself and my program in a context that was not accurate at all, nor was it based on anything other than his own biases. He attacked a colt starting program based on basically a how to ride a ranch bronc video, which you could argue has very little to do with training methodology or ideology. Yes, I am a trainer, but in that specific video and context, I was not actively preaching horse training. Maybe a couple things I said about getting that horse forward, moving its feet, all things I believe, but not entirely. I wouldn't classify them exactly as training advice. So we're critiquing a, technical skill video as if it were my colt starting program, and then forming an argument around that specific video as if it was my entire program. Again, like I said, very few of my colts actually buck, actually, have really bad moments. But when they do, I like to be prepared. I didn't talk about my groundwork stuff. I didn't talk about my saddle prep stuff. I didn't talk about my first ride stuff. I didn't talk about how I utilize a flag person or a pony horse or secondary, tertiary, primary cues. We didn't touch on any of that. We especially didn't touch on the endocrinology and the science behind starting a colt, but it was just specifically a technical skill video on how I personally sit a buck, not on my training program at all. So the argument is formed around a false context. So that would be your logical fallacy of your straw man argument, your straw man logical fallacy. The next logical fallacy is I think it's called the hasty generalization. Yes, I'm young. Yes, I can stick a buck. Those two factors might mean to you that I'm uneducated and I have a flawed program. But the reality is, if you assume that, you're only showing your own ignorance and showing your own biases. Your generalization and experience affect the way you see the world. Just because someone has two traits does not mean that you know the entirety of that person, and that does not mean you know the entirety of their training program. And if you were to watch literally any of my other videos, you would see that a lot of the things that were said about me and about my program in that video are, could not be further from the truth. Moving on, the third logical fallacy is the appeal to authority, and it's one I see super, super often in Clinton Anderson videos. Clinton Anderson has a very successful career, and he has built the method, which is an impressive training method. It has made him a ton of money. He's done a ton of tours off of it. He's very successful from the method, and on top of that, it works. I mean, there is data that shows that people who use the method do get good results from it, but that doesn't mean that that's the end all be all correct way to do everything. And that's kind of the way he frames his arguments: is if you don't agree with me, you are incorrect. And I hate to be that guy. I hate to bring it up. I hate to bring the reality of this to the situation, but in horse training, in horsemanship, there can be two right answers, and programs can coexist in a healthy way. That being said, something outside of the parameters of the method can still be correct. Everything I said in my video, I stand by. That is how I ride a buck. That is how I treat a horse that goes off to buck. Even though that doesn't agree with the method, and Clinton Anderson wants to say it's wrong and stupid and the worst thing he's ever seen, I stand by it. But I don't follow the method. I follow the program I've built for myself and for the business and for the colts that come in. Two things can simultaneously exist. More than two things. There's 1,000 ways to start a colt, and the deciding factor is how the horse responds. The way I start colts, some of them might not agree with. Some colts might not agree with the method. Some colts might not agree with how, English dressage riders start their colts. Some do wonderfully. It really comes down to opening your mind and being able to comprehend that maybe your answer is not always the right answer. And just because you have had success one way doesn't mean success doesn't exist in other places. Woo! Okay. That all being said, I am absolutely always open to finding holes in my program. That's how we learn. That's how we develop as trainers. If I'm doing something that fundamentally is causing my horses to, progress slower or causing a block somewhere, I'm always looking for things. I take lessons, I'm doing research, I'm finding new ways to approach certain situations. But in order for that to happen, my program has to be understood. Unfortunately, in this video, quick generalizations were made about me and my training, and almost nothing that was said was, useful or had any educational value aside from anecdotal evidence based on pure speculation, which led to not only Clinton Anderson, but also his followers to judge me and my company, and the company I work for, in a false light that I find to be just very unfair. All in all, Clinton, if you do end up seeing this video, which I know you're watching, I'm still rooting for you in the cow horse. I'm still excited to see your success there. I still use your ring rope just about every day in my training, and I wish you the best. Yeah, take it easy, guys. Sincerely, the newly dubbed Night Latch guy. Peace.